On today's show, questions in net for the Capitals. Charlie Lindgren played really good this last season for the Capitals, but is it sustainable? And is Darcy Kuemper as bad as his numbers appear? This guy won a Stanley Cup not that long ago. Let's discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On. I've covered it for various other outlets before that. And I'm also the host of the Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go Game Off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. The fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the big question this offseason is who is going to be the number one netminder for the Capitals in the fall. There has been a lot of rumors circulating out there. Is Charlie Lindgren going to be on the go? We thought that he might be on the move at the trade deadline. And then there was rumblings from Elliot Friedman about the potential of Darcy Kuemper being on the move. Who will ultimately reign supreme and be the number one between the pipes for the Capitals next season? We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about 2 players on the Capitals that will be headed for the IIHF, or Capitals within the Capitals organization, shall we say. And then in the final segment, we will talk about Max Pacioretty, who came to this team with a lot of promise, didn't live up to potential, and what is the long-term plans for Max Pacioretty with the Capitals or in the NHL. We'll talk about that, but just to get it going here, talking about questions in net for the Capitals. And there's a lot of people that are totally bought and sold on Charlie Lindgren, that he is the number one just based on his statistics from this last season. And it's easy to be drinking the Chucky Kool-Aid based on how he played this last season. But to widen the lens a little bit here and kind of take the face off the clock and look at the gears, is it sustainable? Sustainability is one of those interesting things that you don't know until, well, next season comes. Say the Capitals push all their chips in on Charlie Lindgren and say they do something like trade Darcy Kuemper out of here. Well, they end up regretting it if Charlie doesn't live up to the hype. And what am I talking about here a little bit more definitively is we remember the season before that where he was really big, Charlie that is, in the month of December and then kind of faded away. Listen, players in situations can look good in a snapshot or in a vacuum. If you want to take a look at Charlie Lindgren last season and just isolate that alone, it looks really, really good. But is it sustainable? And why is it that we look at Darcy Kuemper, who has a long history of being a really great netminder, won a Stanley Cup for the Colorado Avalanche not too long ago, that all of that seems to be erased because he had one down season for the Capitals? It's interesting how, just small sample sizes and snippets and things in a vacuum can kind of erase the bigger picture. Is Charlie Lindgren really the better netminder than Darcy Kuemper? And I want you to think about that, not just based on what we saw this last season. In total, there is a lot more footage. There's a lot more history with Darcy Kuemper, of course, as he's been in the league longer. But that is the question. And I think that something the Capitals, Brian McClellan, will need to examine. Are we really just willing to set Darcy Kemper free and trade him just based on the fact of having one bad season. And is it even possible? That's the question. They are paying Darcy Kemper a boatload of money. Would there be a team that would want to take on that? And is Charlie Lindgren, is he expendable, considering that the Capitals have really great options in Hunter Shepard and Clay Stevenson? These are the kind of topics that we will dig into this offseason as there's no games being played. Let's just really delve into it a little bit deeper here and think about it objectively. Let's not just think about how Charlie Lindgren played just this last season and just think that that is going to be the case for years to come. It very well might be, but is that the case in actuality? But taking a look at it, the Washington Capitals, in fact, are facing a lot of roster questions this offseason. With the Caps being eliminated in 4 games in the first round of the playoffs, this team is seeking for answers for the future. And in upcoming episodes, I'll talk about different positions. But in tonight's episode, in this segment, we're going to talk about the netminding situation here. One of the biggest questions is who will be in the net for the Capitals in the fall. With Darcy Kemper posting some of his worst numbers of his career, posting a 13-14-3 record, one has to wonder if he's still the right guy for the job. With Charlie Lindgren, the team's backup netminder, posting some of his best numbers in his career and at a far less pay rate. The question, and it's a difficult one, is which goalie potentially will be traded this summer. Now, what is appealing about Charlie Lindgren on the trade market is that he has 1 year left on his deal. He's like 1.1 million, that if a team could scoop him up and have a year left on his current contract at such a small rate, what kind of return would that yield for the Capitals? That is what we are thinking about right now, being that I've talked about on the show. And if you're not aware, the Capitals have a lot of options in net, whether it's on the big team, down in Hershey, all the way down to prospects, that the pipeline in net is well stocked. I talked about Hunter Shepard. I talked about Clay Stevenson. There's Garen Bjorklund and, just Antoine Keller. There's so many different options for the Capitals up and down. And those are just the ones, I'm thinking of off the top of my head, that there is plenty of options. So, if the Capitals did something, say they moved Darcy Kemper out, say they moved Charlie Lindgren out, there is options. I mean, you're seeing how Hunter Shepard has played down for Hershey, playing in the Calder Cup playoffs right now. We saw how Clay Stevenson played for the Hershey Bears this last season. Oftentimes, those two guys flip-flopped or vacillated back and forth at being the number one netminder in all of the AHL. And if they weren't the first, they were the second. So viable options, suffices to say, for the Capitals. But taking a look at Charlie Lindgren emerged as a standout player this season and during the playoffs, made a significant impact for the team, serving as the backup goaltender to Darcy Kemper. Lindgren defied expectations by delivering exceptional performances when the team needed him the most. His contributions played a vital role in the Capitals' success throughout the playoffs. Through the 23-24 season, Lindgren participated in 50 games, achieving an impressive 25 wins, 16 losses, and 7 overtime losses. Additionally, he maintained a remarkable .911 save percentage, showcasing his exceptional skill between the pipes. Notably, Lindgren has also excelled in shutting down opponents, as he is tied for 4th place in the league with 6 shutout victories. So I'm not here to say that I think that Darcy Kemper is the better one. I'm not here to say that Lindgren's the better one. It's just something to ponder in this offseason. Before you get ahead of yourself. Again, it's easy to isolate in a league of what have you done for me lately. It's easy to look at Lindgren as the clear-cut number one if you're willing to look past what kind of netminder Darcy Kemper has been for a long time. Taking a look at his biggest accomplishment as being the netminder on the Colorado Avalanche the season they won a Stanley Cup. He has the history. And in breakdown day, he said that he knows he's capable of more. He worked on his game, that he was just never given the opportunity to go back in and show what he had. Because for the last 2 to 3 months of the season, the Capitals were in a win now mode. They wanted to put in the netminder that they perceived was going to give them the best chance at winning a game. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for Darcy to come in and say, hey, I've fixed my game. That he was kind of the odd man out. Brian McClellan spoke about that as much as well. So a difficult position for Darcy as he, didn't have his best season, actually one of his worst, if not the worst, if depending on how you want to take a look at his numbers. Was it just a blip on the radar for Darcy Kuemper, or is it a symptom, or is it a sign of something worse? Has he fallen off? Is he not the netminder that he once was? And should we believe that Charlie Lindgren, in fact, is as great as he was just based on this last season? Interesting questions for the Capitals. Two pieces on the team that could fetch a pretty big return, all things considered. If you can get a team that's willing to look past how Darcy Kuemper played this last season, he could fetch a big return. But is a team going to be willing to take on a contract like that? Is a team going to be willing to, as far as the money and the length is concerned, are they going to be willing to do that and bet on the fact and take a gamble that he is the netminder that he was years ago? And on Charlie Lindgren, I know what other teams see in Charlie Lindgren. We see that he was one of the better netminders in the NHL, not just on the Capitals, but in all of the NHL. They could get a guy with 1 year left at a bargain basement deal. What a great accomplishment for a team that could use a netminder. As we see, even teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs here, some teams are struggling in net. Questions. You take a look at Toronto, for example, that if they had a netminder like Charlie Lindgren, probably would have been in a better position. So I think that, Charlie Lindgren could fetch a big return, but would the Capitals be willing to give up a guy like Charlie Lindgren in hopes that the return that they got was enough? For me, I guess it depends on what the return is. As I spoke of, there's only about 3 untouchables on this team: Ovechkin, Carlson, and Wilson, and I'm willing to listen to offers on most anyone else. I'm all about this team being competitive soon. I don't want it to be something that's going to happen years from now. I would like this team to be competitive in the fall. And if it means they have to move out a big piece, even like a netminder, for the greater good, for the bigger picture, then I'm all about it. And as Capitals fans, I think that you should be all about it as well. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about players that will be playing in the IIHF. 2 Capitals players, or within the Capitals organization, will be playing. Which players am I talking about? I'll discuss straight ahead. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to you as customers. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on the Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So there are 2 players within the Capitals organization that will be playing at the IIHF tournament, and a good opportunity. And there was the opportunity for more players to play. So ultimately, why did some players do it? Why did some players not do it? Well, I think that in part it was a tough season for the Capitals. We know that it was a dogfight until the final game, that they had to win the last 3 games of the season to even make it to the playoffs, and then were extinguished quickly by the New York Rangers. I think it was a bit demoralizing. I think that it was tough on this team as the schedule was particularly difficult. There was a lot of, games many nights in a row, a lot of travel out to the West Coast, that kind of thing, that maybe for a lot of the players, they just want to take it easy this summer. But a couple players in particular will be partaking in the IIHF tournament. The Capitals have two players playing in the World Champions. Martin Fehervary will be heading to the IIHF World Champions. He will be representing Team Slovakia. Ryan Leonard will join Team USA. But, the big thing for me is when these players play in these tournaments is I worry about them getting injured. I understand that they want to represent their home country, but my fear is they could be getting injured, and the team that's cutting their check, well, if they say Martin Fehervary gets injured playing for Slovakia, who's the loser in that situation? Well, Martin is for sure, but so are the Capitals. And it's interesting that, the team that's cutting his check, Slovakia is not cutting his check, or not that much of it, that, it's an interesting position for the Capitals, or any NHL team for that matter, as the risk. But that's not my decision to make. That I'm not the GM. It's just something as a Capitals fan is in my mind. Ryan Leonard, of course, would be another one that's playing as well. The roster for the Team USA is already loaded with talent like Kevin Hayes, Seth Jones, Matt Boldy, Cole Caulfield, and Brady Tkachuk. It sounds like a dream team in the making. Leonard is having a heck of a hockey career already. A young man. He won a gold medal playing for Team USA for the IIHF World Junior Championships earlier this year. There was some speculation, if we remember, that Leonard would join the Capitals for the playoff push or in the fall. But the bad news for me and, Capitals fans is that he decided to play his sophomore season, or he will, shall we say, play his sophomore season for Boston College. But Leonard instead decided to play again for Boston College, where he had a record-breaking season for the Eagles, amassing points in 41 games for the Eagles this season. Also breaking a record for most goals by a freshman with 31. An absolute stud on the ice, a player that, of course, I would like to see sooner than later, but he is a young man, and let him grow into the role. I think that ultimately that is the right thing. But those weren't the only two players to be invited. Charlie Lindgren was also invited, but turned it down because he wanted to focus on hockey and training and go turkey hunting with his grandpa back in Minnesota. Can't blame him. It's the offseason. We know that Charlie Lindgren faced a heavy workload pretty much the entire season, but most notably in the playoffs. Just take a break here. Hockey's going to be coming back in the fall. I don't blame him. Dylan Strome also turned down Team Canada. I think the biggest reason the Capitals players that were invited that don't want to attend is the last few months of the season were difficult. A very busy schedule, like I talked about, plus given the fact the team made it to the playoffs but was eliminated. Rest up for a few weeks and get back to training, said Spencer Carberry on 106.7 The Fan. So there's not a lot of time for those guys to kick up their feet and just take it easy. As you're a professional athlete, even if you're not playing on the ice, in order to keep yourself in peak condition, that is what you have to do. You hear about the different players that show up into camp not in shape. Sometimes you hear that in the NFL or the NHL. To be NHL ready, you need to keep in peak condition. Alex Ovechkin spoke about that as well, as he's touched base with his trainer. So I think that ultimately that is what's behind it. We know the players that wanted to do it. We take a look at Martin Fehervary. He really wanted to help Team Slovakia. Ryan Leonard wanted to help Team USA. It all makes sense for those players that want to do it. But I also understand the flip side of the coin on the players that don't want to, that, just to take it easy a little bit, as the hockey season will be coming sooner than anyone thinks. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about Max Pacioretty. It's been a bit of a bumpy ride for Max. I think there was a lot of hopes that he would, when he joined the team, that he was going to bolster the goal scoring department, but he didn't really do that. What is the future for Max Pacioretty with the Capitals and the NHL at large? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there is just so much stuff good in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much that you can get. Unique stickers you can trade with your friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new emojis, and travel the boards with hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go's feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot machine. And there's also new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, talking about Max Pacioretty. And was it a bust? Was it worth it? You take a look at it. They signed him for that $2 million deal, a guy that at 6 different times in his career had scored 30 goals. I think it's worth the risk. And ultimately, make no mistake about it, the Capitals would not have got Max Pacioretty had he not had those back-to-back seasons with Achilles issues. It was worth the risk. But, you take a look at it. Was he the right guy? I think as you take a look at the Capitals, what they did last summer during free agency, there was a push even back then to get that top 6 scoring forward that has been elusive for the Capitals. We've heard about it for the longest time. It's just never come true. Brian McClellan said he's done his best to see it happen. So the Capitals settled on a couple players last summer in Joel Edmondson and Max Pacioretty in hopes that it would help this team over the top. Max Pacioretty, like I say, a player that historically has been a really great player. Max Pacioretty has had to overcome a lot in his NHL career, having torn Achilles twice in 5 months. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. It meant a lot to take a step back and put things into perspective. I never really wanted to give myself any credit at all, Pacioretty said. So when I looked at the season, I obviously wanted more, and I wanted to have more success as a team and individually, but I also never thought I'd be up here talking right now. This is from Breakdown Day. And your heart kind of went out to him at one time. He was a legitimate upper echelon goal scorer in the National Hockey League. We remember him playing for the Canadiens, the Golden Knights, briefly the Hurricanes. That on paper, it seemed like a slam dunk that Max Pacioretty on this team, that is a name that is pretty much a household name if you are any kind of NHL fan, outside even being a Capitals fan. So on paper, it seemed like a good deal. The Capitals were ultimately able to sign him for a bargain $2 million. Max is a guy that scored 30 goals 6 different times, like I said. He pulled off the improbable and joined the Capitals on January 3rd. There was a lot of talk, and when was he going to join the team? We knew that he wasn't going to be good to go right out of the gate in the fall, so the Capitals had to wait, and they had to hope that that he could be at least a portion of as good as what he was at one time. As it turns out, that was not the case. I think that, as we take a look back on Max's time with this team, we'll look at what he was as more of a mentor for the younger players, but ultimately showing up on the score sheet, that wasn't it. But the Capitals, they did take a chance on a guy that had injuries. And how did Max Pacioretty reward the Capitals? Well, when other teams came knocking during the trade deadline, he said, no, I want to stick with this team that took a chance on me. He had the opportunity to go to New York, a team, of course, that could have used his services. But he said, no, I want to stay with the team that took a chance on me. When a lot of other teams passed on me, the Capitals did the right thing, or in his eyes, the right thing, and took a chance on a guy that historically has been a big contributor. And that's what it's about. His loyalty was huge for me. He had a chance to go to a contender, but chose to stay with the Capitals because of what they did. They gave me a chance when there was a lot of uncertainty about how I was going to respond, if I was going to be able to play at all, Pacioretty said. And, the Capitals have done this kind of thing historically, kind of taken a flyer on maybe a player that's older and sometimes able to get more out of them. We take a look at Brett Conley, you take a look at Devontae Smith-Pelly, different players that found their way with the Capitals. I think that there was a hope that, Max Pacioretty would come here and be a big contributor. As it turns out, again, that is what I will remember him for on this team, is being loyal to the team and being a good mentor to a lot of the young players. The future of Max Pacioretty is up in the air, not just for the Capitals, but in general. The thing that made him a success before has diminished. His skating and his shot, were his bread and butter, have faded with time. He only scored 4 goals and 19 assists this past season, a far cry from Pacioretty, who was in his prime. I never had a year where I didn't score a lot of goals, he said. And so for me, this was new. That being said, definitely took a lot for me to even get out there and get on the ice. And I take a little bit of moral victory in that regard. But at the same time, I was a far cry from my old self, and it's hard to accept sometimes. And it's a guy that put in the work. If we remember, he is the guy that moved into Lars Eller's old house, and the garage was set up as such that he could work on his shot. One of his biggest attributes as an NHL player was his shot, a lethal shot, a good skater. He could work on his shot that had always been so good in Lars Eller's old house in the garage. So a unique situation for him to work on his game. But he's not going to give up. He wants to get back where he once was and see where it goes. He hasn't hung up the skates. He said that in breakdown day that he's going to put the work in this summer and see where it goes. He is a guy that has faced a considerable amount of adversity in his time in the NHL, and he thinks that he's up for the challenge, and I'm wishing him nothing but the best. I just don't think it will be with the Capitals. But I'm someone that always is going to keep going and never get up and do my best. I can try and get to that level where I feel like I'm capable of. And whether I'm training to play or not, I'm going to give it my all and see where it takes me, Pacioretty said. So a story about Max Pacioretty, a guy that, did his level best to get in the best shape that he possibly could. And for the Capitals, on paper, it seemed like a good idea. I knew it wasn't going to be a slam dunk. My big fear is that he was going to have more issues with his Achilles. As it turns out, that wasn't the case. So you take a look at it. It was a worthwhile gamble. So now what do the Capitals do next season? Well, they're going to have to go out and search for other players like a Max Pacioretty, except for younger. I think that has been kind of the MO for the Capitals for the longest time, is to get these older players on cheap deals, and hopefully, you can get more out of them. You can squeeze more juice out of the lemon, if you will. But in this case, it just was a gamble that didn't pay off. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The Capitals have got to, I think, look for more younger talent that can help this team, not just this next season, but in years to come. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. I will have more Bears coverage, Hershey Bears coverage for you this week, as I will have a couple guys from different Hershey Bears podcasts and guys that write blogs for them this later in the week. So stay tuned to Locked On Capitals. It's an exciting time as the Hershey Bears are off to a good start. Ethan Frank has lit it up for the Hershey Bears. Hunter Shepard has been big in net, as well as Hendrik Slop here. So a lot to be excited about, and I'll have much more to talk about as far as the Hershey Bears are concerned later this week. So, all right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.